Hi, my name is Eliza Lieberman, and this is my mom, Katya Lezen, when she was bald. In 2011, she battled ovarian cancer, and in 2013, she faced a recurrence. I chose to do my personal project on genetic testing because without my mom's tests, who knows if she would still be here today. My mom found out through her genetic tests that she carried the BRCA1 mutation, which causes her to have a high susceptibility to ovarian and breast cancer. After she battled ovarian cancer, she found out through these genetic tests that she had an 85% chance of now getting breast cancer, so she decided to undergo a double mastectomy, which might have saved her life. When I turn 18, I can take these tests and find out if I carry the BRCA mutation, my risks of getting cancer, and hopefully it will help me and my future family not face anything like my family did. For the research portion of my project, I chose to zero in on Myriad, which is a genetic testing company. I interviewed one of their genetic representatives, Heather Mikesell, and I also interviewed my mom for her story. But because Heather lives in Ohio, I had to send all my interview questions via email, and that worked pretty well. In my mom's interview, which I did in my living room, I learned a lot of things about her that I didn't even know. What prompted you to get the genetic test?
Well, I actually didn't find out that I was even a likely candidate for the genetic mutation until my oncologist told me that the pathologist who had identified my cancer in the ovary that was removed from me also saw markings that were consistent with the BRCA1 genetic mutation. And in fact, my oncologist, his first words to me, like before he even introduced himself, were, "Are you Jewish?" Like, that's how we walked into the room. He said, "Are you Jewish?" And I'm kind of looking at him like, you know, really? That's how you're going to start this whole conversation? But he was confident, and it turned out he was right, that I was BRCA1 positive. And so he suggested that I meet with the hospital's genetic counselor, which I did. And then I found out I was positive for BRCA1.
And did knowing that scare you?
Absolutely. In fact, I remember distinctly when I found out, I felt like I just kept losing the lottery. Like, you know, the hits kept on coming. I'm like, not only do I have cancer, but now I also have this genetic mutation, which in retrospect, I feel kind of silly about because cancer itself is a mutation. And, you know, ultimately, I see the mutation part of it, the BRCA1 status, as almost a positive because it kind of helps at least explain it. So instead of feeling like, you know, why did this happen to me? I'm kind of like, okay, I get why this happened.
So we know that it sort of helped you with it, but how did the mutation in any way hurt you?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, it felt terrible that, you know, I had this genetic mutation primarily because it is a hereditary mutation, which means not only could I trace how I got it, but it also, I have a 50-50 chance of handing it off to you or your sister or brother. So in that sense, it's kind of terrifying because it's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving, you know?
Are you glad that you know though?
Absolutely, because, well, it's kind of twofold. For me, and this is a surprise to a lot of people, even though it didn't help me identify my cancer, like know that I was likely to have this cancer before I actually got the cancer, even after cancer reared its ugly head, there were things that could be impacted by knowing that I have the BRCA1 genetic mutation. So it turns out that my cancer is more susceptible to chemo based on my being BRCA1. So let's say someone from the general population who has ovarian cancer that's not from a genetic mutation, they don't fare as well with the chemo that I got than I do because of the type of cancer that mine is. Also, BRCA1 tends to do better with a peritoneal port, which is what I had. You know, where the chemo was blasted directly into my abdomen to the infected area. So I'm glad on that front, and then I'm really glad with respect to what it means for you and your siblings, because I feel like the only way this is a true negative is if you just like bury your head in the sand and don't use that knowledge to your advantage. But if you harness that information and that knowledge, then I think you can, even if worst case scenario you're positive as well, you're going to know in time to prevent the cancer from happening. You're going to be self-exams, and just kind of like be armed with that knowledge so that it is something that, is a powerful tool for you versus something to be afraid of.
And is there anything else about genetic testing in general that you want to add?
I think that's kind of like my main goal when I go out and talk about it to people, is that no one is dictating to someone what they should do with that information, but have the information. That way when you're making decisions, which I totally acknowledge are your right to make, you're making it with all the information at your disposal. So find out what's going on. I mean, I kind of feel like it is what it is. You either have this cancer cells, ticking inside of you, or you don't. And if they are, then yes, that's distressing news, but it's far more distressing to not do anything about it. So find out all you can. It's amazing that we live in a time where this information is at our disposal and we can find out. And then it's up to you what you do with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When I interviewed Heather, I learned so many things about genetic testing that I had no idea about before. For instance, 40% of people with Ashkenazi Jewish descent, like I have, end up with the BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation. I also learned that some people are not fond of genetic tests because they are afraid that the information gathered will be misused. I learned that since the 1960s, almost every newborn gets tested because some diseases with tests can be stopped early, like mental retardation. Heather also believes that within the next 20 to 30 years, genetic testing will become a routine part of our medical world and will immensely help us stop diseases early and find the risks of cancers in people. Genetic testing is done through a saliva sample or a blood draw. Insurance normally covers 90% of it, and privacy laws are in place so that all of your information is protected. This information was found on the Myriad website.
In order to ensure that my personal project was clear and easy to understand, I made a list of criteria to follow while producing my product. This list included that the article should be informative, easy to understand, a proper reading level for my peers, not too lengthy, multiple interviews, and I believe that I accomplished all of these goals. The overall goal of my project was to create an easy-to-understand article so that my peers and I could further our information about genetic testing and its pros and cons. Across this journal, I kept day-to-day things that I did on any advancements I made in the project, including when I interviewed Heather, when I received the questions back, when I met with my advisor, when I interviewed my mom, and when I made the plan for my article, and when I actually finished the project. My reflection on this project is I think I overall did a very good job explaining genetic testing in my product. I learned a lot, which was very helpful towards my product and my general information. I believe that I accomplished my goals for the project and I followed the criteria I made for myself very well. The global context I chose for my project was science and technology because while genetic testing is about health and performing better in the future, it is also a great innovation that we didn't even have a couple years ago, and it shows that our technology in the world is really up and coming for our personal lives, but also for the health well-being of the whole human race. I mentioned earlier, a big part of my product was to create an easy-to-understand article as a public service announcement so that my peers and I could really understand the benefits and cons of genetic testing so we are well informed for our futures. As another public service announcement, my sister and I actually traveled to Orlando, Florida in July to perform a genetic testing song that we made at the National Myriad Conference, which is its annual conference, which was held in Orlando, and we were invited out to go perform it. So here is us singing it.